we're joined now by Melinda Han Williams, Chief Data Scientist at Distillery. Melinda will be presenting for the next 20 minutes or so. We'll leave plenty of time for audience Q&A, so drop those questions in early and often, and we'll get to as many of them as we can toward the end of the session. So Melinda, it is a pleasure to welcome you to Outlook 2022. Thanks for being here, and take it away.
Thank you, Matt. I'm excited to be here. My name is Melinda Han Williams. I'm the Chief Data Scientist at Distillery. We are the custom audience solutions company. And as Matt said, today I'm going to be talking about engaging with customers on their terms in a privacy-first digital landscape. So I have the honors of kicking off the second day of this event, AdWeek Outlook 2022. And there's a theme today about connecting with consumers. So I thought we'd take a minute to start by just thinking about it from the perspective of the consumer. How do consumers want to be reached? I can figure out how to advance my slides on this thing. Here we go. That works. Yeah. Cool. So here I'm intentionally saying consumers, not customers. I think there's been a really big increased focus on first-party data lately. And with that, I've heard a lot of conversation about the best way to interact with and personalize experiences for those customers with whom you already have a direct one-to-one relationship with. So in this time today, I really want to focus on consumers in general. So that includes people who are not your current customers. It's the people that you need to reach in order to grow your business. And it's people you don't have a relationship right now. You don't have a relationship with them and you'd like to start one. So let's get back to that question. How do these people want to be found and connected with? And what interactions will they view as appropriate, given your lack of a relationship with them, honestly? So of course, not all consumers want the same thing, right? So let's break it down and let's really focus on those people who, all else equal, would prefer that the ads that they see are relevant to them. And really, if we don't tie this to any conditions of something that you have to like give up or consent to in order for your ads to be not boring, that's really going to be most people. So this big red bubble in the middle here, that's who that is, people who prefer non-boring ads, all else equal. So then overlapping with that bubble is this little bubble on the left. And that's a bubble for those consumers who are happy to consent to data sharing. So these are folks that get the quid pro quo that they're participating in, and they're very willing to log in, opt in, or whatever else it is that they need to do to share their data. So great, thank you for all those people in the gray circle. And for those people, there are lots of great solutions out there for how to reach these users with relevant advertising, both now and post cookie deprecation. Then, of course, there's this other bubble on the right, and that is those consumers who really prefer not to be identified for advertising. So whatever their reasons for holding this preference, the point is that they don't want advertisers to have any data about them or really any information that identifies them. And this is a sizable group of people. This is not like an edge case that you can ignore without having real consequences for your business. A couple months ago, I did a webinar with Joanna O'Connell from Forrester, and she shared this fact that 56% of consumers had responded that they disagree with the statement that they're willing to share personal information to get more relevant advertising. So that's 56%. That's just over half of all US adults are preferring not to share their information. So for those who prefer not to share data or to be identified, marketers really have a lot more limited options on how to connect. First, on terms that those consumers find acceptable, and then second, really in a way that performs with any kind of efficiency or leverages the data assets, the existing data assets that they have to understand who their customers are. So that's really what I want to talk about today, how to engage with these folks effectively and on their terms. So now the ability to target ads efficiently without wasting too many ad dollars on unreceptive people, this is really a feature of digital advertising that marketers have come to expect. And when identifying data is available on that person that you're trying to show an ad to, there really is a lot of information that you can use to infer whether someone is likely to be receptive to your ad and to your brand's message. And by the way, this is a core offering of Distilleries. So our custom AI models are built custom for each brand with that brand's first party data, and they identify the brand's best futures customers based on those people's, all that previous digital behavior, all this, not all the stuff that's here, we focus on observed digital behavior. But the point is that we use data that people have shared with us, and we use this to find the brand's best future customers. So this can really be a powerful way to find, to run highly efficient campaigns and identify exactly those users who really should see your message and are going to be the most receptive. But what do you do when that data is not available? So in those cases where the consumer prefers not to share any information about themselves, you know where the ad will be placed, but that's really all you know, all the information you have in deciding whether or not you should show this person an ad. So the problem that we're really trying to solve here is to connect with potential future customers who haven't showed any information about themselves. So the only thing we really know is actually data about the ad inventory itself, where the ad's going to be shown, and nothing about the person themselves. So there's this problem to solve, and I call it the unidentifiable consumer problem. So what are the options for solving this problem? Well, there's lots of ways to try and avoid it. So you can ignore this segment of the population entirely and just like give up on that whole segment of your market. So this is a surprisingly common solution today, honestly, with the unidentifiable consumers that we see mostly today with people like Safari users who don't have cookies enabled, and their data isn't accessible that way. So another option with some of the new opt-in identifiers that are being developed, you can hope that this person opts in or logs in on some sites, and then you can maybe see them on enough sites that you actually have some chance to reach them with an identity-based solution. Or you can refuse to accept that any consumer is unidentifiable and try to somehow re-identify this person anyway. But I don't advocate for any of those solutions. It's not enough for this problem to avoid the solution or try and come up with some kind of workaround, because this is not an edge case. There will always be a population that opts not to share their data. And that population, it exists today, and it'll be even bigger after cookies are retired in 2023. So, and for that population that opts not to share, we have to assume that choice is intentional and reflects their preference. So remember, the goal here is to connect with these people, these future customers, on their terms. So I really think it's important that every marketer has a solution in their toolbox that addresses this problem, this unidentifiable consumer problem, at face value. So how do you reach a user with well-targeted, high-performing advertising without knowing a thing about who they are? Well, as it turns out, Dstillery has just such a solution. So we call it Dstillery ID-free custom AI. And it is a patented cookieless targeting solution that has been live since 2020, so over a year now we've been running this. And Dstillery ID-free custom AI, it solves that problem of how do you reach that unidentifiable consumer when the only piece of information you have is information about the inventory where you're going to be showing the ad, where that impression will show up. So because it only uses that one piece of information, it doesn't have any dependencies on anything that's being built for a post-cookie ad ecosystem. So it doesn't depend on any particular browser tech or APIs or adoption of any new IDs. So because it doesn't have these dependencies, it means it's really future-proof against cookie deprecation. But it also means it's ready now. So we've been using this, as I said, since 2020. We don't have to wait for anything to be developed or to reach scale in order to use this solution. It's ready now. It works on every type of browser. You can use it on Safari today to reach today's unidentifiable consumers there. You can, Firefox, Chrome, whatever, whether or not someone has a cookie or any other ID, this approach can reach them. And it actually performs really well at scale. So, okay, so what is it? The idea behind Distillery ID-free custom AI is to take that same predictive AI technology that we've been using for years to identify a brand's most valuable users, and then apply that to signals that are ID-free. So signals about the impression rather than about the person themselves. So now, instead of trying to identify the most valuable users for the brand, we're finding the best impressions that are going to be the most valuable for that brand. So to do that, we start by looking at all the signals from all the combinations of impression characteristics that we can use to decide whether to show an ad. So we take all that stuff, we use a neural network process to build out what we call the map of the internet. So this looks at digital journey patterns, and it maps out the behavioral meaning of a visit to any URL on the ad-supported internet. So then we combine that map of the internet with the brand's first-party data to build a custom model that's optimized just for the brand to pinpoint those precise targeting moments that are predicted to deliver optimal results for that brand. And when you target ads in this way, it produces great results that really compare favorably against other options. So, so we've been running this for a while now. This is the results that we've seen with 3 different clients that we ran with. And this is really how we recommend testing. So we're looking at ID-free custom AI, and we're looking at it head-to-head against other tactics that a client might use, both ID-based tactics today, cookie-based custom AI, and contextual targeting, which of course doesn't rely on cookies. So we look at these things head-to-head. We look at them on traffic where there are cookies so that we can really get a clean, fair comparison between tactics. And then also so that we can measure using KPIs that the brand is familiar with. So you can really benchmark, what this solution is going to look like compared to other tactics and compared to what things have looked like in the past. So, okay, we're looking at CPA, so lower is better. So if you look at the pet e-commerce retailer on the left, we have our 3 tactics: ID-free custom AI and teal, and then ID-based custom AI and contextual targeting. And what you see is that ID-free custom AI comes in just behind our best ID-free solution, it comes in just behind our best ID-based solution, and they both beat out contextual targeting by a wide margin. For the B2B logistics company, you see the same pattern. ID-free custom AI comes in just behind ID-based custom AI in terms of CPA, and they both beat out contextual targeting by quite a lot. And then for the financial services provider, you see something that we weren't necessarily expecting or trying to achieve, but we're starting to see it every now and then as we run this with more clients, is that the ID-free solution actually beats out the ID-based solution sometimes. And so, I'm not here to claim that I can target better without an ID than I can with an ID, but I think stepping back, the broad conclusion here is that ID-free custom AI really performs in the same ballpark with the best ID-based solution. So you can run something that doesn't use any ID at all and no cookies, and delivers a performance something like on par what you're used to seeing with ID-based targeting. Okay, so how do we make this thing perform so well without any information about the user themselves? So the key here is in shifting our focus from trying to understand this person to trying to understand the moment. So, so remember that the information about the impression, that inventory itself, is the only information we have to decide whether to show an ad. So we direct all our AI capabilities towards this one moment, when we have that moment when we have the opportunity to reach that person. And so without prying into any other information or inferences about the rest of this person's life, we can now understand what this moment means about their motivations, their current focus, and whether this brand's message will resonate if we deliver it right now. Okay, so we're focusing on the moment, and we do this by using behavior. So not that unidentifiable consumer's behavior. We're looking at digital journey data collected through research panels of people who are not accessible for ad targeting. So we're looking at these digital panels where we can see people's full digital journeys, and we study those panel participants' behavior so that when we see that same behavior in an unidentifiable consumer later, then we can decipher it. So the goal here is to learn what a visit to this site means behaviorally in terms of what a person's motivations are for visiting that site and what types of actions they might take next. So by looking at a stream of millions of data points of this digital journey data, we can identify patterns in how that one site is visited. And that helps us understand the behavioral context around this moment when it's available later as ad inventory to reach an unidentifiable consumer. Of course, we don't just do that for one website. We do it for every ad-supported site on the internet. So we use a custom neural network process that digests all that data, all that digital journey data, and builds this thing, which is what we call the map of the internet. So this is like a baseline of that behavioral understanding that we're going to then use to power our ID-free model building. So this is the map right here, this cloud of dots. We actually build this map in 128 dimensions, but we've smashed it to 2D here so that it'll fit on your screen. And on this map, every dot is a website, and nearby dots are websites that are visited with similar intent. Someone's looking, the reason why someone visits that website is similar. And to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, I think the best thing is really to zoom in on this little corner of the map of the internet in this red box. And so here, remember, every dot is a website. Dots that are really in almost the same spot on this map are websites that are visited for almost the same reason, for almost the same intent. They're about almost the same thing. So here's a bunch of websites. They're all about high-end audio gear. Then dots that are kind of nearby on this map are websites that are about kind of the same thing. So now we switch from high-end audio gear, we move a little bit over, and now there's a bunch of recording gear. Then something else that's kind of like that is musician gear. So actually guitars and stuff like that. Kind of like that is sites about how to teach yourself how to play the guitar. You can also see music magazines on here. And then you can think, well, we started with high-end audio there. What other ways can something be like high-end audio? Let's go in a different direction. So there's camera stuff. So there's camera blogs here. And related to that is, of course, photography. Related to that is color tools and other kind of graphic design stuff like stock photos and fonts. And so really, I mean, every website on the ad-supported internet is somewhere on this map. We have now a quantitative understanding, a quantitative representation of what every single visit on the internet means. And you can really, I mean, you can get lost in here for hours, just like finding all the different random corners of the internet that you never thought about, and I definitely have. But the point is now we have, well, do you see why we call it the map of the internet? It's an understanding of the whole internet. Now, this is not the model. This is not the final product. This is the understanding that underlies the modeling that we're then going to use to build out ID-free models that are custom for each brand. So, okay, this is where the starting point. To create something that's custom for each brand, the best place to start is by using that brand's first-party data. So we're going to layer on the brand's first-party data. And the first-party data gives a seed signal for interest in the brand. Then the AI modeling process, it expands that indication of brand interest out to every site on the internet. And so this is actually the final product. This is a model that gives us a score for every potential impression that we could possibly show for this brand. So based on the characteristics of that impression, like the URL, the time of day, the geo, we have this prediction of the value of every single impression. And so the result is this, just for your brand behavioral intent score for every web visit on the internet that answers this question: when someone visits this site, how likely are they to be interested in your brand's message? So the example I have here is a model that was built for an audio equipment brand. And I'm showing it here as a heat map where red is hot, blue is cold. So just to get an idea of kind of like what this model has done, I've labeled some of the regions on the map that are hot for this brand. So some things that you might expect, like high-end audio, maybe tech news or gaming content news, if you kind of think about how audio is used. It also has some sections that I, not being an expert in this brand, wouldn't have expected. Would have taken some market research to get at, like car news, truck and off-road, and then even things like craft beer and Formula One. So this gives you an idea of how this thing has found a specific score for each one of these sites that will tell you how valuable that visit will be for this brand. And again, those categories that I just rattled off, that's not the output either. The real output is that individual score for every single impression. The category labels here are just to give us an idea of what just happened. But the fact that we can get a score for every available impression is really what's key to allowing this approach to scale while still maintaining great performance for the brand. So just to wrap it all up, how to connect respectfully. I think so of course, all marketers need a solution to reach those customers, those future customers who don't opt in. And again, I think it's really important to have a solution that solves this problem at face value, with no workarounds, no avoiding this problem. When you want to connect with consumers without identifying them, how are you going to do it effectively? You need some tool in your toolbox for that. Second, to solve that unidentifiable consumer problem, without workarounds or without avoiding it, it's really key to shift your focus to understanding that moment when the ad will be shown, rather than trying to understand the person. And this is really what allows you to engage really respectfully and on their terms. And of course, Distillery ID-free custom AI does just that, and it's ready to use today, and it performs on par with the best ID-based solutions. So thank you for joining. And with that, I think we have some time to answer some questions.
We do. Great job, Melinda. Thank you. We've got a couple of real good questions. I have a couple of my own. Folks, keep them coming. If you've got questions, fire away. So Melinda, stepping back, in the unidentifiable consumer problem that you've described, just how many users will be unidentifiable? Can you give us some context around that number? Just to frame it.
That's such a good question. And I'll start by saying we don't know, right? So today, the way that most consumers or internet users are identifiable to advertising is using cookies. And today, it's around half of US internet users, a bit more than half are using cookies. So it's nearly half are unidentifiable today. That will of course change when cookies are retired. And it'll change because cookies will be gone, but also all of these new solutions that people are coming up with will be at better scale. So we'll have like a new way to identify customers, that those people in that bubble of people that opt in. So that's why I think, rather than, a lot of people make predictions about how many people, in the end state are actually going to be opted in, logged in, and we're going to have access to their information. From this perspective, I kind of want to focus on like, well, what do we know about what consumers want? We know that just over half of consumers, when actually asked, at least on a survey, say that that's not what they want. So we have every reason to believe that right now, nearly half of consumers are going to be, right now, nearly half are unidentifiable, and that number is only going to get bigger as time goes on. That
makes sense. So talk a little bit more about how Distillery ID-free custom AI is different from contextual targeting.
Oh yeah, that's such a great question, because it of course has some similarities in that it's based on the inventory, right? So you can see the connection there. The real difference is that rather than being focused on kind of reading the inventory and finding out what it says and kind of thinking of the keywords that match best with your campaign, Distillery Custom AI is totally behavioral. And because it's behavioral and because we're using all of this behavioral data, we're able to use AI and machine learning to tune it specifically to a goal, to a brand's outcome. So it takes away some of that art of picking the right keywords, but it also really tunes it towards the actual behavioral outcomes we're looking for. The other difference is that because it doesn't rely on there being like enough rich text on the page to extract meaning, or even videos or images if you're better at it. It works on any site. All we have to see is the pattern in which people visit the site. It doesn't matter what's on the page at all. So the language doesn't matter. It can be video, and it finds those both related topics that your market research might have thought of, and the not obviously related topics that might have been harder to come up with or taken more research to come up with.
I gotcha. Okay, and then just for my own edification, does a brand need to have first party data to use it? And then actually, one of our audience members, JP, asks, what's the minimum size and scope of the first party data needed to develop the custom AI ID audience?
Okay, I love the specificity of that question, JP. So the best way to do it is with first party data, because then that really tunes it towards your brand's outcomes. I'll say, before I get to the specifics, we don't have to use first party data. We can use different proxy behaviors and other, we have access to this digital panel where we see all these really rich behaviors. We can use that to find other proxies for the behaviors that that your brand is trying to look for. As far as seed set, so for our classic ID-based custom AI product, our rule of thumb is we want a seed set of 1,000 users. We'll kind of keep it at that for now for ID-based, and I anticipate, I think in the future world, post-cookie, there's going to be less data in general. So we do plan on lowering our limits, and one of the advantages, this approach is like built around making the most use of the least data possible. So we will be looking at using smaller seed sets to drive the outcomes.
Great. Nikki asks, can you tie in the user data to social advertising platforms? And as a follow-on, do you share the related sites and categories with your clients?
So we can use, so far we're running this only on display, on web, and in terms of where we can use it. We plan to expand to other channels and platforms in the future. And I didn't share it today, but we have some really rich insights that we can provide on, one of the cool things about this, as you saw, is it sort of automatically spits out insights about who is a good customer for your brand, and like what types of behaviors are indicative. And so there's definitely insights that we put together to share with clients about that.
And does Distillery ID free custom AI use fingerprinting?
No, so it's using some of the characteristics might be familiar from that, in terms of it's like the stuff you can see about a browser. We don't use all of the kind of detailed stuff that fingerprinting uses, but really the big difference is that we're not trying to get at that person. We're giving that person the space, and we're just using those characteristics like the URL and the time of day to predict what behavior that moment is representative of, leaving the actual individual alone.
I got you. Okay. And then Daniel Williams asked, and I think this is probably the last question we have time for, Melinda. So far, the context has been mostly about sites. Can it factor in content at the page level or be even more granular?
Yeah, we're working with to be able to get there. So like, that's definitely something that we'd like to do. And we know how to do that. We're just looking how to get it implemented.
Gotcha. Well, here's to a great 2022 for you and for Distillery. You guys have been terrific partners. Thank you so much for your time today, Melinda, and thank you to the whole Distillery team for the collaboration.
All right. Thank you, Matt.